The biggest mistake older gun owners make after 65 is believing nothing has changed. Not the law, not their body, not their reaction time, not their habits, not the way a simple traffic stop, a self-defense incident, or even one careless moment in a parking lot could be judged if something goes wrong. And that is exactly why this conversation matters. Because there is no magical federal rule that says the day you turn 65, you suddenly lose your gun rights. That is not the real danger. The real danger is far more personal than that. The danger is carrying the same way you carried at 45, while the risks around you quietly changed. Your medications may have changed. Your balance may have changed. Your grip strength may have changed. Your permit status may have changed. Your state laws may have changed. And if you are still carrying on autopilot, one bad decision could cost you your freedom, your finances, or your future. That is the part most people never hear. They hear politics, they hear slogans, they hear your rights and their rights, and endless noise about what courts just did or did not do. What they do not hear is the quiet reality that for many seniors, the most dangerous carry mistake is not anti-gun legislation. It is stale routine. It is carrying loose in the center console because it feels convenient. It is dropping a pistol into a purse or bag without thinking through access or retention. It is forgetting that state carry laws, permit renewals, reciprocity rules, and prohibited person issues do not pause just because you have been a lawful gun owner for 40 years. And it is assuming that because you have never had a problem before, you are somehow protected from having one now. If this channel helps you cut through the noise and get to what actually matters, subscribe right now. Because this is exactly the kind of topic people ignore until after something goes wrong. And by then, the lesson is usually expensive. Now let's talk about what has actually changed after 65, even if nobody sat you down and explained it. The first thing that changes is not always legal. Sometimes it is physical, and that matters more than people want to admit. Mayo Clinic warns that some medicines used by older adults can cause confusion, blurred vision, lightheadedness, and loss of balance. CDC also treats fall risk, medication effects, mobility, and older driver safety as serious realities for adults 65 and older. That is not a political opinion. That is a practical warning. Because if you are carrying a loaded firearm while also dealing with dizziness, slowed reactions, or unstable balance, then your margin for error is smaller than it used to be. And here is where the problem gets bigger. A lot of seniors do not think of medication side effects as a firearms issue. They think of them as a driving issue, or a walking issue, or a sleep issue. But carrying a gun is a judgment issue. It is a movement issue. It is a retention issue. It is a decision-making under stress issue. If a medication can affect how steadily you move, how clearly you see, or how quickly you process a threat, then it can also affect whether you are carrying safely. And if you refuse to update your carry habits around that reality, you are not preserving your rights. You are gambling with them. But that is only one side of the story. The legal side may be even more dangerous, because many seniors assume that long experience equals legal protection. It doesn't. Federal law still prohibits certain people from possessing firearms, including people with qualifying felony convictions, certain domestic violence restraining orders, misdemeanor domestic violence convictions, unlawful controlled substance use, and certain mental health adjudications. So if something has changed in your legal situation, a court order, a conviction issue, a protective order, an unresolved legal status problem, your carry decision after 65 is not just about habit anymore. It is about whether you are still legally allowed to possess that firearm at all. That is a brutal truth, but it matters. Because a lot of older Americans think in terms of identity. I'm a gun owner. I've always been a gun owner. I've never had trouble. I know what I'm doing. The law does not care about your personal history nearly as much as you think it does. It cares about your current status. And here is what makes this even more serious. State law may still require things that older carriers lazily stop checking. Supreme Court decisions like Bruin changed major parts of the Second Amendment landscape, especially around discretionary proper cause carry systems. But the court did not say every objective licensing rule is gone forever. Justice Kavanaugh's concurrence specifically emphasized that states may still use objective licensing systems involving background checks, training, fingerprinting, and similar requirements. That means one of the most dangerous phrases a senior gun owner can say is this: "I thought that law changed." Maybe it did. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it changed in your state, but not the next one. Maybe your permit is valid here, but not there. Maybe your renewal window passed and you did not notice. Maybe you assumed constitutional carry made every old rule irrelevant. Maybe you crossed into a different state, still carrying the way you always do, and walked straight into a legal mess. That is why carrying after 65 cannot be based on memory alone. It has to be based on current reality. And here is the carry mistake hiding inside all of that. Too many seniors carry for comfort instead of control. A pistol in a loose jacket pocket. A gun dropped into a purse that also holds keys, medicine, receipts, and a phone. A firearm left unsecured in a vehicle because I'm only stepping away for a minute. A holster choice made 10 years ago for a body that has changed shape, flexibility, speed, and range of motion since then. That kind of carry feels familiar. Familiar is not the same as safe. Because if you cannot access the firearm cleanly, retain it securely, move with it safely, and account for where it is every single moment, then you are not really carrying the gun. You are just transporting risk. And this is where most people do not want to be honest with themselves. Aging changes mechanics. That is not weakness. That is reality. If sitting, bending, turning, standing, reaching, or reacting under pressure feels different than it did 15 years ago, then your carry setup may no longer fit your life just because it once did. A carry method that was fast and controlled at 50 can become slow, awkward, and unsafe at 67. A purse carry setup that felt manageable when your shoulders were stronger can become a retention nightmare if your balance is worse and your reaction time has slowed. A car carry habit that once seemed convenient can become the exact reason your firearm ends up accessible to the wrong person or visible at the wrong moment. Here's what most people are missing. After 65, the issue is not whether you have the right to carry. The issue is whether you are carrying in a way that still respects the responsibility. Those are not the same thing. A right can remain intact while your personal margin for error gets smaller. And once that margin gets smaller, the bad outcomes arrive faster. Now let's talk about the one mistake that quietly destroys more legal cases than people realize. Talking too confidently because you think experience makes you sound credible. It often does the opposite. Older gun owners sometimes talk themselves into trouble because they feel seasoned. They say too much to police. They make confident statements after an incident. They explain instead of staying precise. They drift into stories, history, opinions, and justifications because they feel they need to sound cooperative or knowledgeable. That is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is evidence generation. And if the firearm was being carried carelessly, stored improperly, or handled after a questionable decision influenced by comfort, habit, medication, or simple forgetfulness, then every extra sentence can make a bad situation worse. This is why carrying after 65 requires something many people never train for: humility. The humility to ask whether your setup still works. The humility to ask whether your medications affect your alertness. The humility to verify your permit status instead of assuming. The humility to acknowledge that "I've done it this way for years" is not a defense if the law, your body, or your environment changed underneath you. And that brings us to the real warning in this title. Stop carrying your gun like this after 65 does not mean there is one forbidden technique for every senior in America. It means stop carrying like your age changed nothing. Stop carrying like convenience matters more than retention. Stop carrying like your state's laws froze in time. Stop carrying like a vehicle console is a holster. Stop carrying like a purse is automatically secure. Stop carrying like you can ignore side effects, reaction time, balance, or changing judgment under stress. Because if any one of those assumptions fails at the wrong moment, you may not just lose the gun, you may lose the case, you may lose the permit, you may lose thousands in legal bills. You may lose the protection you spent decades trying to preserve. So here's the bottom line. Turning 65 does not automatically strip you of your gun rights, but it should force you to re-audit everything else. Your legal status, your state rules, your permit renewal, your travel habits, your medications, your mobility, your holster, your storage, and your judgment. Supreme Court rulings have changed important parts of carry law, but they did not erase every objective licensing rule or every firearm prohibition. And the older you get, the more expensive it becomes to confuse long experience with present-day readiness. If this gave you something to think about, send it to one senior gun owner who still carries the same way they did 20 years ago. Because the mistake is not always carrying after 65. Sometimes the mistake is carrying after 65 without updating anything except your age. I'll see you in the next one.